every leader is different. Every person is different. Every manager is different. And there's a massive difference between being a good manager and being a good leader. And leadership just takes time. It takes mistakes. It takes, knowing what to do in certain situations, knowing how to treat people, how not to treat people. But I've always just kind of worked by the simple premise that if you just treat people the way you want to be treated, things will tend to work themselves out.
Hey, Josh, how are you?
Hey, Matt, I'm doing pretty well. How are you?
I'm doing fantastic.
All right, that was all over the place.
It was. Question for you.
All right.
Outside of a zoo, because I know you go to the zoo, but in any other attraction experience, have you ever encountered a wild animal?
A wild animal. I mean, I've definitely seen ducks in the Magic Kingdom, but that doesn't count. I mean, there was another wild animal in the Magic Kingdom, which is probably where this is alluding to. That happened recently.
Oh, that one. Yeah.
I don't know. Not that I can think of off the top of my head. What
Okay.
about you?
Well, it was down in Mexico, and it was a kind of a wildlife. Well, it wasn't a zoo, and it wasn't really a true wildlife park, but there was one of those big monitor lizards, like out in the walkway.
Hmm.
Um, but I don't know. But like I said, it wasn't like a zoo or a wildlife park. It was kind of a nature park, but they
Yeah.
didn't have like animals in habitats or anything like that. So maybe that's the
Sure.
closest.
Okay.
Because yeah, I don't think ducks count.
Have you ever been to Flamingo Gardens?
I never have. No.
So it is an animal park, and they do have a lot of animal habitats. They also have hundreds, possibly thousands. I don't know. We might have to get verification of this. Peacocks that roam
Oh,
the property. Like
so
they're
okay.
just walking around.
Yeah.
It's weird, but really cool. Oh, and there was another time I this wasn't at an attraction, but this was at a resort in the US Virgin Islands called Keneal Bay that had donkeys. Just I don't know. They just lived on the property.
Interesting.
It was
Interesting.
interesting.
So I do remember when I worked at Canopy Lake Park in New Hampshire, there were some peacocks that would just roam free around the property.
Yeah.
I guess they're wild animals. I don't know. They just kind of roamed around and poked at people's hubcaps and stuff. And
Yeah. They're pretty chill.
they are.
But they can move.
They can move and they can squawk really loud. And when they put their feathers up in the big fan, it's pretty
Yeah.
spectacular.
It is pretty
Um,
spectacular.
yeah.
Yeah.
So
So, Matt, why on earth are you asking me this?
well, it just so happens that our guest today, Greg Fuller, who is the general manager of Anakeesta in Gatlinburg, Tennessee, tells us that one of the operational challenges that he faces and his team face are bears in the
Bears
park.
in the park, hanging out, just like the peacocks at Flamingo Gardens,
Yes.
donkeys at Keneal Bay.
They do. They are in the bear's natural habitat, right in the mountains of Gatlinburg. So it's not uncommon, but that is something you probably don't necessarily expect to see at most, attractions. Is just a bear wandering around.
It definitely is not. And if you're not expecting it, it might be mildly alarming.
It could be.
I would imagine that it would. So I'm guessing the guests go, some are prepared that, hey, we might see some wildlife today.
I would hope so. If you're in that part of the country, right? You're in the Smoky Mountains. So I would hope that they would be somewhat prepared. But, even around here where I live in Western North Carolina, we have black bears that roam our streets sometimes. And I
Yeah.
was walking my dog one time and I was just walking down this one street that we always go down. And probably, I don't know, 40 yards ahead of me, there was just a bear right in the middle of the street. And I said, huh, there's a bear. And I just turned around and we walked the other way, and bear never, got in our face or did anything. And, so I think as long as well, I don't want to give bear advice, but for the most part, in my experience, if you don't bother them, they don't bother you. Now that's different. If you get in between a mama bear and her cubs, don't do that. But for the most part, if you're not getting in the way of mama bear and her cubs or bear in the food, you're probably okay. At least black bears.
This is not Bear Pros podcast.
No, so it's not. It's not. Getting back to Greg.
Yeah.
Right. Getting back to Greg and his experience at Anakeesta, he's relatively new at Anakeesta. He worked for a long time at Six Flags. And, one of the things that he talks about throughout his career that he found is helpful is taking care of his team and really treating them the way he would want to be treated.
That message resonate, or it just came up so many times throughout the interview. Like you said, he's new to Anakeesta, but he is not new to the industry. He was with Six Flags for 32 years before joining the team in Anakeesta as general manager in early 2023. And he talks about his career journey where he worked in a warehouse and then in retail and in games and food and beverage and then operations and then water parks. And I think I got all of them. I might have missed one or two or so. And with each of those roles, he had never had any previous experience in that particular department or that area of the business. And when we asked about like how'd you learn that so much, he said the most important thing is about taking care of the team and they'll take care of you. So he said that was the biggest way that he was able to, I would say, not just learn the skills, learn the department, but also be able to be the trusted leader in that team as he went into an environment that was otherwise unfamiliar.
Absolutely. And speaking of an unfamiliar environment for him, Anakeesta, like when he got the call, he said he had to Google it and figure out what the park was all about. But he said when he went there and when he gets to go up there every day, it's just an awe-inspiring experience. And, from a guest perspective, it's very different from any other kind of park because you do have to go up the gondola to get up to the top. It's not a chocolate gondola, although that'd be really cool. I would expect that at Hershey. Maybe not at Anakeesta. But you have to go up the chairlift to get up to the top. But up there, I mean, just fantastic views of the Smoky Mountains and kind of an adventure park on the top of a mountain.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and he walks us through the entire experience. And the way that it sounds like to me is you need to go there at least 8 times a year because you need to experience it in every single season. So that's 4. And then you need to experience it during the day and at night. So, you got to do each of those twice. So they're able to use the natural environment. I see it as a huge marketing advantage to say this is why you need to buy an annual pass, or this is why you need to come back, at least every few months, because it's a completely different experience. And they tap into that with the events that they hold throughout the year. And he talks about Astrolumina of the trail with all the lights and being able to metaphorically reach up and and grab the stars. And it just sounds just like such a phenomenal experience that is very different from most other attractions or even types of attractions.
Absolutely. Well, I think their marketing team may be giving you a call to talk about those 8 different times that everybody should be coming. But one of the other thing that really permeated this conversation, and you kind of alluded to it, was getting out of your comfort zone. In terms of if you want to pursue a career in the business, there's going to be times when you're going to be uncomfortable. And again, you hear Greg talk about his career path, and there were so many different opportunities that he took that he may not have had a ton of experience in, but he did it because he had a passion. He could relate to the people. And oh, by the way, then he could put himself in a position to learn the tactical part of it. So, getting outside of your comfort zone, I think is, good advice anyway, just to learn new things and experience new people and find new ways to do things. But especially when it comes to your career path, Greg has a lot of great advice about that.
Yeah, he talked about getting out of your comfort zone when talking about his personal career journey, and then with leadership advice for aspiring professionals from a networking standpoint. So it was cool to hear it from both angles and really fuse them together.
So should we jump on the Chandala and get to this interview with Greg?
I am very excited. Let's do it.
Hey, Greg, welcome to the Attraction Pros podcast. How you doing today?
I'm doing great. How are you guys?
We're doing great. So excited for this conversation. Can't wait to hear more about your career in Anakeesta. But let's start with you. Tell us a little bit about your career in the industry.
Okay. Well, it started a long time ago. I started like many others in this industry. Started when I was 16. It was my first job in high school. Worked for the food warehouse at Six Flags over Georgia. So I had a couple of buddies that were in leadership there, and I needed to get a job, but I really didn't want to work in customer service, right? I really didn't want to deal with people. So I got a warehouse job. I'm like, oh, this would be great. So I did that for a few years, 7 years actually, through high school and college, and went to school at University of West Georgia. I was West Georgia College back then, but graduated college and with an English degree, with a secondary education minor. So I was supposed to be a teacher, and teaching just kind of comes naturally in the theme park business, especially in leadership positions. So I was offered a full-time position in 1997. To be a full-time retail supervisor at Six Flags over Georgia. And I was paying a little bit more than teaching at the time. So I took it. And, the rest is history, so they say. So I started, did that for a couple of years. In 2000, I got the opportunity to become a games manager. So, one of the things I always used to joke about with my career specifically is I spent 32 years with one company. Well, not a joke necessarily, but 32 years with one company. But I always took roles that I didn't have any experience in prior. Does that make sense? So when I started, I spent 7 years in the warehouse. And then in 97, I was offered a full-time position in retail. And I'm like, well, I've never worked in retail, but it worked out. And then in 2000, I was offered a games manager position. And I told my director at the time, I've never worked in games. And he's like, you'll figure it out. It'll be fine. And then in 05, I had an opportunity to go back to retail as a manager. Then in 2009, I became revenue director or in-park services director that was over all of F&B, catering, retail games, attractions, arcades, everything. And same director, I said, well, I don't have any food experience, right? Like I've never worked in food. I've never worked in catering. He's like, you'll figure it out. You'll be fine. So I did that and did that for about 9 years. And then in 2018, had a really cool opportunity to kind of cross over. My park president at the time, Dale Ketzel, wanted to swap myself and our ops director. He had a crazy idea. He's like, both of you guys have been in these roles a long time, so I'm just going to flip you. I'm just going to switch you. Greg, you're going to ops. Jason, you're going to revenue. And we both were like, okay, we'll give it a shot. And so that was the first time I had really kind of dove into the operations world. So I became the operations director in 2018. And it was a blast. At that point, I was over still, again, all at Six Flags over Georgia. And I was over all things ops, admissions, rides, security, park services, and did that for a whopping 9 months until Dale came back to me at the end of 2018 and said, hey, we have a general manager position open in the water park in Marietta, Six Flags Whitewater. And I need you to go there. I'm like, oh, okay, great. I'll do it. I've never worked in a water park. You know that, right? Like, I don't have any water park experience. He's like, oh, you'll be fine. So that was kind of the running, joke of, not say joke of my career necessarily. Y'all can edit that out. But just kind of, I kept progressing through the ranks, always with Six Flags, until here recently. And April, May of this year, I had been reached out to from a recruiter for an opportunity at a place called Anakeesta. And I'm like, I don't even know what that is. Like, I had to Google it. Like, I'd never heard of Anakeesta. And what I found was a beautiful, amazing property that immediately I was interested in. So, and it was here in Gatlinburg, in the great city of Gatlinburg, Tennessee. So, for me in my career at that point, my kids are older. My youngest graduated high school last year. So I was kind of at a point in my career. I spent a lot of time at Six Flags, obviously. And I was looking, to kind of make a change. And that change presented itself. And I was fortunate enough to be offered the general manager position here at Anakeesta. I've been in that role since early June. So that's, and it's again, unlike any other positions that I've had over the years, I've never worked on top of a mountain. however many thousand feet we are up in the air here. So yeah, so it's been great. But that's kind of the background of my story.
That's such a fascinating journey that you've taken just, throughout the course of your career to lead to where you are today. And I know we want to talk more about Anakeesta, but curious first, if we can talk about well, first, it seems like you've worked every job in the business that is possible. There's probably very few that you haven't, right? The mindset of taking on a job with something that you don't have any previous experience in. Can you talk about maybe how you, I'd say, accelerate the learning curve and be able to gain the skills of, now it's warehouse, it's retail, and then in F&B and operations and water park and, and all of that with maybe connecting the dots with prior experience and perhaps a different area of the business, but being able to kind of fill in the gaps as quickly as possible.
Yeah, I will say it's, it wasn't always easy, obviously, but it was kind of two things. The one side of it to me was the people side of the business, right? So people are people, and I think good leaders know how to connect and adapt to any sort of situation. And by no means am I the perfect leader. Nobody can say they're the perfect leader, but I do think I have enough leadership skills that I've acquired and learned and gained over the years to be able to adapt really to any situation and really to focus on the people. I've always felt like if you take care of your team will take care of you. And that was really, kind of what I would call the soft side of the business. And that was the easy part for me. It was always easy to connect with people. It was always easy to talk, as you can see on this podcast. I have no problem conversing with people. So, that was always the gift of gab, as some would call it. I've never had an issue connecting with people. So that's half of it. The other half is what I would call the hard skills or the technical or the tactical side of the business. And that was a little tougher at times, learning to go from a warehouse environment to a retail position, to a games position, to a director, and then ultimately to a general manager role. That tactical side of the business changes quite a bit, right? Because you're learning more things, you're in charge of more responsibilities, you have to know more about the hard skills of the business. But really what I've learned over the years is that the soft skills is kind of what segues you into that, right? Like if you take care of your team, get the trust of the team, build your team the way you feel like is best serving in whatever role that is or whatever part that is. Everything else seems to take care of itself. Like that was always kind of my philosophy, is that if you just take care of folks, things tend to work out. And for the most part, that's always kind of been the case with me. So I think that's kind of where my focus has always been. It's just really on those, what I call soft skills and the people side of the business, and create an environment where people want to work and want to come to work every day and want to excel and want to progress through the ranks. I got to a point where, I spent 15 years with the company. I'm like, wow, I've been here forever. Like, this is crazy. And then I got to 20 years and I got to 25 years. And, you kind of, the perception of you as a leader also changes, because when you're in a role or in a company, not so much a role, but in a company that long, you build a lot of credibility and you build a lot of equity. I would say that people just have trust in you, and they trust you to be the leader. And that was the challenging part of leaving Six Flags and coming to Anakeesta, is that nobody knew me. and I had not been in that situation forever, honestly, in a long, long, long time. So that was one of the first challenges coming here, is that I was unknown. Like I had to I'm still spending time building that trust and focusing on the people side of the business. And again, focusing on the team. And, those lessons I learned over the years at Six Flags, I'm putting those to play here at Anakeesta.
So, Greg, I think it's interesting. You took that first job in the warehouse because you didn't want to deal with people, and now it's all about people, right? But I'm curious if we can go a little deeper, because I love what you say about taking care of your team, and that's really one of your main focuses, one of your priorities. Can you give us a sense of what that looks like. I think a lot of people say, well, take care of your team, but what's the day-to-day? What does that look like from an action perspective for you as the GM?
I would say I've always just tried to stick to the simple philosophy of, and get ready for it. It's going to be a shocker, but treat people the way you want to be treated. And everything else tends to just take care of itself. And I wish I could be more complicated than that or more complex, or I wish I had a great formula for you, but it's really, to me, that simple. And every leader is different. Every person is different. Every manager is different. And there's a massive difference between being a good manager and being a good leader. And leadership just takes time. It takes mistakes. It takes, knowing what to do in certain situations, knowing how to treat people, how not to treat people. But I've always just kind of worked by the simple premise: if you just treat people the way you want to be treated, things will tend to work themselves out, regardless of what. And just allow people to do their jobs, allow people to do what they do best. Everybody's in this industry with passion. Like, this is a tough industry. Everybody's job is tough. I get it, but this is a tough industry. And to really excel in this industry, it's a passion. Like, you really have to put your heart and soul into it. And I'm sure you guys have talked to many leaders over the years, and many managers and general managers and everyone else on your podcast. And it's tough. It's tough to be a leader of a lot of people, but you really just kind of have to put your faith into your team. Allow your team to do their jobs, allow them to do what they do best, and treat them the way you want to be treated yourself. And that's as complicated as I can make it.
Yeah. Excellent. No, it's good advice. Good, I would say, words of wisdom. And like you said, we've talked to many people on the podcast who have brought up the importance of having the passion for what we do. And I would say every time we hear it it hasn't gotten old yet of hearing it. It just reinforces it every single time. So I appreciate you sharing that. So Greg, let's talk a little bit about, I would say, this summer and the last several months, and kind of your transition to Anakeesta. Could you share a little bit about kind of what it was like moving to the mountains of Tennessee and starting this new journey?
Yeah, absolutely. It's been phenomenal. Like, I love Gatlinburg. I love, me being a homer to the state of Georgia, right? I was born and raised in Georgia, worked essentially in one part my entire life. Marietta, I worked in two cities, right? Austell for Six Flags Over Georgia, and then Marietta for Six Flags Whitewater. But that was it. That was the extent of my traveling, for within jobs. So it was a big leap of faith for me to leave all that and to get out of my comfort zone a little bit and come to Anakeesta. And it's just been phenomenal. Like, I love Gatlinburg. It's such a different market because it is a very vacation driven market. It's not what I would consider a regional theme park necessarily, because it is Gatlinburg. I think someone told me when I first got here, and don't quote me on these numbers, but there's roughly 3,000 people that lives here and 6,000 jobs. So, it's a small town that's not a small town. And it's heavily driven by the service industry. And there's so many of us that live here that we all do the same thing. We all work in some sort of service type job or customer service type job. And but it's been phenomenal. And then the Anakeesta side of it, I get to work on a mountain every day. I get to take in, like, the views are incredible. Like, it's just, there's just, hard pressed to say there's anything like it. Like, it is such a beautiful park. The owners and the builders of Anakeesta have done such a tremendous job over the years, and it's a new park. It's fairly new. We're only going on year 7, right? So opened in 2017, end of 2017. So 6 years in, we're still kind of a newborn when it comes to being a theme park company, but it's been phenomenal. I love working here and love working with the people here. And it has been quite the transition going from Marietta, Georgia to Gatlinburg. But it's been a great transition. It's just been a lot of fun. So I'm looking forward to see where these next several years take us.
So, Greg, can you kind of walk us through the Anakeesta experience? Because you kind of said it's on top of a mountain, and some people like you may be Googling it right now if they'd never heard of it. But tell us a little bit about the experience from the guest perspective.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's unique in the sense that you can't drive to the parking lot and walk through the gate, right? There's two ways to get to the mountain. So you take the Chandala, and I'll explain what a Chandala is. You have a Chandala, or you have the Ridge Ramblers. And that's the only two ways. It's similar in some ways. I think Maggie Valley, Ghost Town in the Sky, might be the only other park that I ever remember. And you guys can correct me if I'm wrong, that you had to ride a chairlift to get to the park, right? I think there's very few of those situations out there, and that's the way Anakeesta is built. So our Chandala base is on the parkway in Gatlinburg. Our parking lot's right there. You can ride and it's a chairlift and a gondola, right? So we have 8 enclosed gondolas, and then we also have 100 I forget, I should have done my homework. I forget the actual number of chairs we have, but we have a lot. And we also have 6 of the 28 to 32 passenger Ridge Ramblers. And that's your first experience. So once you get your tickets, it's kind of, okay, now what do I do? How do I get to the top of the mountain, so to speak? And so that experience of itself, it takes about 15 to 18 minutes to get to the top of the mountain. And then once you get up there, it's just, it's an outdoor adventure park. Like I wouldn't even call it a theme park, an amusement park. It's an outdoor adventure park. And, the Anakeesta experience is really, we have zip lining. We have a mountain coaster. We're about to open a second mountain coaster here shortly within the next couple of days. And by the time this airs, it would have been open about a month. So our second mountain coaster is about to open. We've got multiple themed villages throughout the park. Firefly Village, Black Bear Village, Stone Village is in the back. We have a new area, which we'll talk about a little bit later, I think, that's going to open here soon, called Bird Venture. And you've just got, aside from all the views and just the beauty of the Smoky Mountains, it also, it's an adventure park. Like it's an outdoor, playgrounds for kids and things like that. So and the views are phenomenal. Like you just can't beat the views from the top of the mountain. Yeah. And we have the Anakeesta Tower. I almost forgot about the tower. That's another 600 feet above the 600 feet you climb to get here. So the Chandala brings you up 600 feet, and then the Anakeesta Tower, which there might be a picture of it behind me. I'm not sure. It takes you up another 600 feet. So, and from there, from the top of the tower, you can see all the surrounding states. Like it's incredible. So that's a little bit about what the Anakeesta experience is.
Well, I appreciate you explaining the Chandala, because when I saw it on kind of our list of questions, I was asking Matt, I said, I can only assume that's a chocolate gondola. So I'm glad that I was able to get that clarification. The way that you're describing this, I'm curious as far as from the guest perspective, or even from your perspective, the first time you came and visited, there's, like you said, you don't drive up and park and walk through the gates. And making the comparison to Six Flags is very easy to get to. You drive there and you're there. At Anakeesta, there's more of almost an emotional investment and a time investment to actually get into the park itself. What are the reactions like when people get to the top of the mountain? And what was your reaction like the first time you went?
So those are 2 different questions, and I'll explain why.
2-part question.
I'll explain my reaction second, but the guest reactions they're just amazing. Like they're like a lot of times, because you can't see the park, what I witnessed, especially my first month here, is that a lot of people didn't even realize what was up there. They didn't know. They saw the chairlift. They saw, okay, it's a chairlift. Oh, fun. But they didn't really know what was beyond that. So that first piece, though, the chairlift is pretty thrilling. Like it's pretty exciting to go up that chairlift. And as you go up, you can't really see the park. You can't, you're going up the mountain 600 feet. And you don't really know what's over there. That's a pretty exciting piece of the experience. So that's where it starts. And then once people get in the park, it's just awe. Like you're just right there on Main Street, essentially, or our version of Main Street, so to speak. and you're right there, and it's all the incredible views hit you kind of all at once if they hadn't hit you going up the chairlift. Now, my experience was very different. So when I interviewed here, and the room that I'm in now, there's a series of houses and cabins that were relocated to this property that were already in this area. And this is the conference room, and my office is right next door in another cabin. And the cabins, the offices are separate from the mountain. So to get to the mountain, I can't just walk out my door like at Six Flags. You walk out of the admin building and you're right there in the park. I have to take a Can-Am or a Polaris up the parkway, up the mountain, all the way to the top. And it's about, 12 to 13 minute ride to get to the top, just to get to the mountain. So when I first interviewed, I didn't really know all that. So I didn't really know that much about Anakeesta. I didn't, I'd done a little bit of legwork and a little bit of homework. And I remember getting in the Can-Am with the driver, with Bryce, who's the president of Anakeesta, Bryce Bentz. And he drove me to the top. And I just remember thinking, we're going through this winding road all the way to the top, and the views just get better and better and better. And then you get to the top and you're on the mountain. And I'm like, oh my goodness, if they pick me, I get to do this every day. And it was phenomenal. So my experience, the team member experience, is even more different than the guest experience. So.
Yeah. And I would imagine, there's a certain allure to working at a theme park. If you love roller coasters or something like that, and if you love nature, working at the top of the mountain in Anakeesta would probably kind of hold that same allure. But I'm also wondering, what are some of the challenges of running a park that's on top of the mountain? Because I would imagine you've got weather and things like that, but I would imagine there's some other things that might come into play that might be an operational challenge or roadblock for you.
Bears. We have bears. That is, so if you're built in a... Sorry about that.
Okay.
You have to edit that piece. My apologies.
As long as it wasn't a bear.
Yeah.
Yeah, great timing. It's right there. No, so there are a couple challenges, and bears are one of them. We're built kind of in their natural habitat, right? And that's one of the allures of coming to Gatlinburg too, is that you might get to see bears. And for people visiting the area, it could be a once in a lifetime thing, right? If you're visiting from Philadelphia or from an LA or even from an Atlanta, you probably haven't seen a live black bear. And, there's roughly 1,900 of them here in the Smokies. So, and it feels like they're all here at Anakeesta because I see them every day. There's a constant parade of bears all around. And that creates some operational challenges, right? Like if they get into the park, you have to kind of deal with that. Everything has to be secure. Gatlinburg has their own special trash cans, right? Everything has a latch on it that's bear proof. If you didn't know that, now you know. That was new to me. When I moved here, I'm like, oh, what's this trash can enclosed in metal? Well, it's bear proof. The other piece of that, and Matt, you mentioned, was weather. And weather is a really big piece of it. As I mentioned earlier, there's only two ways to get to the top, right? The Ridge Ramblers and the Chondalas. That means there's only two ways down. And when weather hits, it does become quite a challenge. It is. And again, you're 600 feet up on the mountain. It's even more elevated when weather hits up there. So it is a big challenge. And again, it's not just like a regular theme park where, if a storm hits and people start leaving, you open the gates and they walk to their cars. Well, they're relying on us for transportation to get them safely down the mountain, which the operations team here does every day just phenomenally. And, so that's a couple of I was, semi-joking about the bears, but it's really not a joke like that. That is one of the challenges of working in this environment. And then weather's probably the biggest piece. There's a few other, like operational challenges. Like, for example, parking in Gatlinburg is tough. It's a real challenge to park in Gatlinburg. So we have team member transportation. We have to provide for our team members. So we have shuttle buses that will pick them up from remote lots throughout Gatlinburg and then drive them to the mountain to their job. So we have to provide employee transportation. as well as the Ridge Ramblers and the Chondola for the guests. So that presents a challenge for our team members as well. We do provide free parking for them at a couple of different lots, but then we have to go get them and bring them to the mountain and then take them back after. So it could be an inconvenience for the team members if you don't take care of your people, right? If you don't treat them right, that's one of those things that are like, well, I don't need to deal with that, right? So we really have to focus on our team to make sure we're taking care of them and making sure they are part of the family and they want to be here every day, because that is one of the logistical challenges of being on a mountain, is you have to get your team members up there. So, and our transportation department does a phenomenal job transporting not just our guests, but also our team members.
That's so interesting. And, the way you describe that, I mean, that's an operational challenge that most attractions don't have. And that was, a new one for you coming from Six Flags and being able to kind of going back to what we were talking about earlier and sort of helping to accelerate that learning curve.
Definitely.
One of the things we're curious about too, this kind of ties into the, there's the views of the park, but then being able to, I would say, leverage that into the guest experience to be able to influence repeat visitation. Because I've got to imagine that the view changes probably multiple times a year. At the time of this recording, it might be different from the time at the release, for instance. Does that play into, I would say, marketing strategy and being able to, say, hey, this is what it looks like today, but 3 months from now, it's going to look entirely different.
Yeah, it does a little bit. And we, you can kind of see that with our kind of pricing strategy. And then also, the real difference here and the not so much challenge for me coming on, but one of the eye openers is that, we're open year round, essentially. So we start March 1st and we're open every day through the end of the year. This year, I think it's January 7th. So we're open through January 7th. And then January and February, we go back to just weekends. So we go back to, I think, Friday, Saturday, Sunday for January, February, and then March 1st rolls around, because that becomes, again, as a tourist destination, Gatlinburg, we've got people coming from all over. So spring breaks are different. So March and April is when all the spring breaks hits. We have to be open for that. Summers are different for people, fall's different. And, here in the Smokies as well, the leaves start changing. So we're getting into that season right now that a lot of people will visit just for that. And so we're heading into a really peak fall season. August and September slow down a little bit. May, June, July is crazy busy. The spring break, like I said, is crazy busy. But here, as we head into the fall and then head into the winter, the views change tremendously. So, part of what we do too is we try to provide different reasons to visit during that period of time. So we had our Blooms and Tunes Festival back in the spring that was very flower focused and blooms focused, and it was just a very vibrant and lively. We had our sunset in the Smokies for the summer. So the marketing push was, hey, come up in the evening. And we also opened After Lumina, which is incredible. If you don't know what it is, we can talk a little bit about that. But After Lumina opened last October, and it gives people a reason to visit at night or to come back to the park, right? And that kind of plays into us expanding our offerings for everyone and have something for everybody to do. And then as you go into the fall, when the leaves start changing, Gatlinburg as a whole just gets very busy. And our whole focus is to figure out how to capture as much of that market share as we possibly can.
So, Greg, you mentioned a couple of areas or attractions within Anakeesta. You mentioned the Bird Venture. You've also mentioned Astra Lumina. I'm wondering if you could kind of give us a little more of a rundown of both of those.
Yeah, so I'll start with Astra Lumina. So we opened that in October of last year. It was designed between our development team here and the owner, Bob Bentz and Karen. Bob, Karen, and Bryce, the Bentzes, are the owners of Anakeesta. I didn't start out with that. I should have had. I apologize, Bob, Karen, Bryce, if you watch this. But the owners of Anakeesta wanted to, with the development team, wanted to create a nighttime event that will draw people back to the park or help us spread the attendance out. Because obviously with a park like this, you could run into capacity issues, right? So if you've got just two ways to get people up, You've got limited parking in Gatlinburg. There are some challenges there we have to work within. So having that nighttime event seemed like a great idea to be able to spread people out throughout the day. And that's exactly what it did. So Astro Lumina is designed between our in-house team and a company called Moment Factory. And I believe there's 15 of these around the world. There's only 15, I should say, of these around the world. And we're the only one in the United States at the moment that's permanent. So there's a few traveling ones, I believe, that will set up and they run seasonally. But ours is a little over a mile circuit through the woods. And it's very, as the name alludes to, Astro Lumina is very nighttime and stars and just, the universe, and I think one of the sayings we have is, if you reach for the stars, what if the stars could reach out to you? And that's one of the kind of the themes that kind of goes throughout. And there's 9 different theme zones. Each one is about a 3 to 4 minute show in and of itself. And you can walk on to the next, and it takes about 45 minutes to go through. Could be a little quicker if you move faster. If you stay longer, could take you up to an hour to go through it. So it's just a really beautiful event. And then we also, Bird Venture, I mentioned earlier, is our new treetop birdhouses that we're building in the back of the park as part of our new Stone Village area that opened about a month ago. The new Hellbender roller coaster, as I mentioned earlier, or the Hellbender mountain coaster, I apologize, the mountain coaster that will open here shortly. And then Bird Venture is a series of 3 tree houses 3 birdhouses that really are designed to show off the animals of the Smokies. We have one that's an owl, a woodpecker, bluebird, and they're all themed, heavily themed, both the exterior and the inside of the birdhouses. And there's walking trails and climbing trails to get up to it. And there's 7 huge slides that will take you back down to the base level. It's just very unique, and it's going to be a really, really cool addition to the park. And it will open here later this year. Early November is what we're targeting right now.
Awesome.
Very cool. The way that you're describing both of these events here, and then even, the mountain coaster and the attractions, that it is distinctly Smoky Mountains, right? It is distinctly based on the region. Like it's not something that can easily be copied and pasted from anywhere else. And then even going back to what you were saying earlier, as far as being like an outdoor adventure park versus an amusement park, and curious as far as how all of that, I would say, bakes into the overall experience, and then really leading to the takeaway. What's the guest walking away with? Are they learning about the animals and natural environment of the area and the history of all of it? Because it sounds like there are really a lot of opportunities for, I would say, an educational experience as well.
Yeah, there really is. And that's one of the things that we do have some partnerships, for example, like with Friends of the Smokies. Friends of the Smokies is one of the groups that we work with that we allow our guests to make donations to try to expand the awareness of Friends of the Smokies and what they do for land conservation and preservation. And that's one of the groups that we work with. But also, to answer your question directly in terms of the takeaway, we want people to walk away feeling like they have really experienced the Smoky Mountains. And, downtown Gatlinburg, there's so many different things to do. There's so many restaurants and really cool places, a great aquarium right across the street. There's lots of things to do. But our focus is really to get people to feel like they're taking a little piece of the mountains away with them when they head back. We want to provide the best possible views you can see anywhere in Gatlinburg. And I think we do that really well. And so that's one of the pieces. And one of the things you mentioned, Josh, in terms of education, we do have what's called the Fire Walk that's up here that I didn't talk about earlier, but it's a series of placards dedicated to the fires of Gatlinburg from 2016, which those fires were really kind of decimated the area. And Anakeesta was being built around that time, and the fires came all through. So that Fire Walk explains kind of the history of that. It talks about some of the heroes. It talks about some of the locals that helped during that time and kind of what those fires did to the mountain and did to this area. So that's kind of one of the pieces, the educational pieces that we provide here, that we want people, again, to walk away feeling like they've got a little piece of the Smokies, right? Like a little slice of heaven up here, and that you can just kind of take it with you and take it with you in your pictures and your memories, and really create an experience that you just can't get anywhere else.
Greg, one of the things I'm curious about for you personally, you came up through Six Flags, and obviously that's a large corporate environment, but you keep talking about the people and taking care of things. Now you're at Anakeesta. It's a smaller operation. Obviously people may be a little different in Gatlinburg than they are in Atlanta, in terms of the customer base or even the employees that you have there. So has your leadership style changed at all, or have there been any adjustments that you've had to make in making this move to Anakeesta?
You know what, man, I don't think my leadership style has changed at all. I think, I've been doing this a long time, 32 years in the industry. I'm 48 years old. So, you can do the math. Obviously, I mentioned I started when I was 16. So, my leadership style hasn't changed. What's different is that I alluded to this a little bit earlier. I came from a very, and you mentioned, a very corporate environment, right? From a very, Six Flags is very structured and corporate, and not just Six Flags, but the SeaWorlds and Busch and the Cedar Fairs. And it's a very corporate theme park environment. And, here it's really like family. Like you mentioned a smaller operation, but really, this operation is massive, like transporting people back and forth all day long. The amount of full-time headcount that we have to have here, because we do operate year-round. The year-round operation, me coming from a water park, the year-round is taking a little getting used to. I have to be honest with you, because we operated about 88 days at Whitewater, and that was our season. You had 88 to 90 days during a summer water park season, and then you would help out at the dry park in the shoulder months. And here it's daily operation. We're open 9 to 9 or 9 to 10 pretty much every day, and that has been a bit of a challenge to get used to, and just because it's just a different mindset. So from a leadership standpoint, I really haven't changed my leadership style. It's just more, I've had to get used to a very different operation with a different set of people, on the team member side specifically, because we're year-round employment. Like we are providing livelihoods for our staff here. And I came from an environment that was used to more high school and college students, working primarily during the shorter season, specifically in the water park. And that's not the case here. We're providing lots of career opportunities here, and lots of opportunities for growth. And one of the cool things to me about working in it's a family-owned business, right? So working in a family-owned business, you can make decisions very quickly, which that's not always the case in the corporate world. In the Six Flags structure, sometimes you've got multiple layers or different approvals, and that's not the case here. We can move quick. Like if we want to make a change, we can do it immediately. If we feel like we need to improve an area here, we can focus on that very quickly. So that has been a really welcome change. Honestly, that's been a very cool thing to be a part of. Again, coming from a more structured corporate environment.
Nice. So Greg, we just have a few minutes left here, but wondering, as far as advice that you would give to up and coming leaders in the attractions industry.
I think if you put out, what I would put out there is that I mentioned earlier, this really is an industry of passion, right? It's an industry of love. Like you just kind of get hooked. And if that bug bites you, like if that's something that you get into the leadership role and you start kind of looking at what is my career going to be, I think hard work and perseverance is going to take you a long ways, because there's so many opportunities within the industry. And you guys know from all the people that you talk to and all the 300 plus podcasts that you've done with attraction leaders, there's so many opportunities out there. And even if it's just within one company or within multiple companies, or there's so much pathway for growth in this industry. And I think if people get bit by that theme park bug and they get bit by the love for this industry or love for roller coasters or love for whatever it is that you fall in love with this industry, there's many, many opportunities. So work hard, persevere, because you're going to have to. Every day is not going to be beautiful. Every day is not going to be great. Every day is not going to be perfect. But if you persevere, put in the hard work, and just keep pushing, and most importantly, as I mentioned earlier, take care of your teams. Take care of the people around you. Take care of the people that work with you every day, because they're the ones that make things tick. They're the ones that make everybody's life easier, both the guests and all of our team members. So just take care of your teams. Whatever. Don't forget the reason we're here, and that's to provide tremendous experiences for guests and to provide, possibly sometimes once in a lifetime experiences for our guests. So you got to take care of the guests, you got to take care of your teams, and work hard and push forward. And there will be many, many doors open for you. If you're a young leader in this industry, the future is really, really bright.
Very, very well said, Greg. And I have one quick follow-up to that, because you started off telling us your career story and how you took all these positions that you didn't really know a lot about. What do you say to young leaders who say, I don't know anything about that. I don't know anything, like getting into a position where they don't know anything, but they can figure it out, they can learn. Like, what is your advice in those situations?
I think the one thing I didn't mention earlier that I'm thinking about now, I probably should have, is that a lot of it is relationship building too, right? A lot of it is networking, and not in the traditional sense of networking, but in terms of building relationships with not just your team, but also with mentors. And that was the one thing with my career path. I had some really great mentors that I worked with over the years that helped open the door for me, because I put in the hard work, because, I would work 70 hours during the summer as a college student, and, 70 to 80 hours sometimes, picking up additional shifts and just putting in the hard work. And those mentors saw that. And I mentioned Dale Kessel earlier is one of my mentors. Melinda Ashcraft, who I know you guys are familiar with, is one of my mentors. And she was part president over Georgia for a long time, part president at Fiesta, Texas, and Kentucky Kingdom, and a few other properties. And, those mentors were very important to me to provide those opportunities. And that's one thing that I've tried to do as I've kind of gotten more established and older in my career, is to be a mentor to people, to young leaders specifically, that want to grow within this industry, because that's one of the things that I had learned along the way. And it's those relationships is what opens additional doors for you. And don't be afraid to network. Don't be afraid to reach out of your comfort zone. Especially in today's age. When I started, there was no internet, right? So there was no cell phones there. I mean, everybody had the landlines that was connected in your mom's kitchen or whatever. It was very different times. So you had to get out and now with technology where it is, it's so easy to build that network now. So I would definitely recommend that. I think that is something that as you build those relationships, those mentors, those people in leadership positions that may be higher than where you are, they can be your doorway into greater things and into future opportunities.
Awesome. That is really great advice. We really appreciate it, Greg. And this whole interview has just been absolutely fantastic. And as we start to wind this down here, if people want to learn more about Anakeesta, if they want to get a hold of you directly, where would you send them?
Yeah, absolutely. If I would go to Anakeesta.com. That kind of gives you what we're all about, and it kind of gives you a good snapshot. Our website is phenomenal. It gives you a good snapshot of what it is. And then I can give my email address too, if that's okay with you guys. And if there's, attractions leaders out there, anybody that has questions, whether it's, anything really, I like being open and available. So, gfuller@Anakeesta.com. So it's real simple. GFULLER@Anakeesta.com. And like I said, our website is a tremendous resource as well to kind of show off all things Anakeesta.
Excellent. Well, thank you again, Greg, for your time today. We'll make sure that all that gets in the show notes, and people can reach out and learn more about Anakeesta and get in touch with you as well. And for everybody out there who's watching and listening, just remember, We are all attraction pros. Thanks for listening to the Attraction Pros podcast.
Make sure to subscribe so you can tune in when new episodes release, and even better, please leave us a review on iTunes.
For more information, visit attractionpros.com.